Hello, I am happy to be with you today. Today we're going to be working on a Goldfish watercolor painting. Here is the original that I did from a live goldfish, or a picture of a live goldfish. So I'm just going to be copying this today just so you can see what the finished product will look like. I'm going to be using a number 8 round brush today, as well as Windsor Cotman watercolors. The 3 colors I'll be using today are Cadmium Red, Cadmium Yellow, and the Alizarin Crimson. So I'll be using these 3 colors. And I've mixed the colors in my little tray already with some water. This is just the straight Cadmium Red with some water. This is the Cadmium Red and the Cadmium Yellow mixed together with water. And then this is the Cadmium Yellow by itself. And then this is the Cadmium Red with the Alizarin Crimson mixed together. And I always do like to, once I mix my colors, test a little bit just so I can see what they'll look like when they're dry. I do have, if you can see, my 2 water containers, one for dirty, one for clean, that I'll, put my dirty brush in, then I'll rinse from there. And I've very finely drawn with pencil the outline of the fish, and then I went over and just erased it so I could barely see it. I can go back over once I'm done with the painting and erase, but I like to start out with less. So I definitely want to start lightest to darkest. So if you can see these test strips here and how they look with the original painting of the fish, I'm going to start with the fins. And thankfully the flowiness of the goldfish, the fins, are very fluid and see-through-ish and ethereal anyway, which is perfect for watercolor. So I'm going to go ahead and get my brush wet, and I'm going to start with that mixture of the alizarin, the Cadmium Red and the Cadmium Yellow here. So I'm just going to add a little bit more water. I have my paper towel for dabbing, just a tad, and I'm going to just follow the outline of this top fin here. And it comes all the way up. Bring that around, and again, the beauty of the watercolor is that I can come back with water and make it even more translucent if I want to. Get a little more water, a little more color. Come back in, trace around the head of the fish. And again, because I'm starting with the lightest color, except for around the eye, that does have some white, and I don't want to be getting color in there. It is pretty difficult to make a mistake with watercolor because you can always go back with water even after it's dry and fix it. So we're doing this bottom fin here just with the lighter color. Okay, just kind of blending that in. And then make sure that's all filled in. Okay, then I'm going to go in with a little bit more. I'm going to come to my colors here and add a little bit more color because I do want it to be a little thicker color, and it will bleed into the wet, and that's fine. And so I'm just gonna go in the outline, and you'll see it'll bleed into what I've already painted, and I will blend that a bit more as well. Okay, so I'm just gonna go around the outline, and then coming from the original here, you can see how this fin folds over, so we're just gonna put that in there. Just with a wet brush, I'm just gonna blur those lines there. And again, we'll come back for the more distinct lines once everything is completely dry to to paint in those. So don't worry about anything being sharp edges right now. We're just gonna do some blending. Okay, I'm gonna come back in with a little water, that color, dab a tad, and just trace that more distinct outline of the bottom fin, like so. Okay, rinse, dab, and blend. And this is perfect because I was trying to decide whether I wanted to name the first fish Fin or Flow. I'm going to just add a little more dark. You can see it blends in. You want to keep your paintbrush on the paper, because otherwise you'll have more dabs kind of drying there. So I was trying to see if I wanted to name the fish Fin or Flow. So now I'll have one of each. Okay, I'm going to bring this darker color to the edge and just make it a little bit of a more jagged fin edge. Okay, and the same with this area. And the great part about watercolor is it does layer really nicely, and it will dry lighter than what you're seeing, so just always keep that in mind. Okay, and I think I'm going to stick with that for right now. Actually, I'm going to go in with the Alizarin Red, Crimson, and the Cadmium Red. Just very lightly dab the edge, and I'm going to add that a little bit to the outline here. See how that just blends nicely and just gives a little bit more of a distinct ridge on that edge there. Okay. And if it's too sharp of a line, just go back with just a wet brush and blend it just like that. And we'll make this distinct fold over here once this fin is dry. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to mix a little bit more of this Cadmium Red, Cadmium Yellow. And I think I'm going to actually come and do a third bit here with the Cadmium Red. And I do want this to be opaque for those front tiny fins as well as this top fin. But I do want all the colors to be similar. And I'm just going to add a little of that Alizarin Crimson. Okay, so it's not quite as dark as this color here. Okay, so because this fin's still drying, I'm going to go ahead and come down to the bottom fins here. So with my water, I'm going to start out with that Cadmium Yellow and Cadmium Orange color and just fill in. Let's add a little more Cadmium Red. There we go. Now, let's see. These are this is going to cross over. Okay. Now we'll come and do this one here. And if you do make a mistake, paint out of the lines, you just rinse your brush, rinse it in the clean water, dry it off on your paper towel, and then just come alongside, and that kind of soaks that extra color right up there. Perfect. Okay, do a little of this reddish color. We'll just put this along the edge here. And that will bleed in, change the coloring a bit. And I'm going to wait on that back little fin because it's touching. Let's clean this up a little bit more. And I can come back once this is dry with more condensed coloring to kind of make that a sharper edge. Okay, now I'm going to start with the bottom of this fin here. A little more water. Okay, we're going to make this a little bit rugged, like it would be. And then fill in that space. And we'll do the same for this back fin over here. Again, we'll start at the bottom. Add a little drip of water. Start at the bottom. And work our way up. Outlining around the eye there. And making that fin there. Adding a little of the deeper reddish color here along the bottom of this fin. And maybe we bring it out a little bit. Same here, we'll add a little bit of that Alizarin crimson. Maybe this is a little shadowed, so we can make this a little darker. And pull this deeper color up into the fin. And then we'll just blend this out. Little hairs on my brush. Okay. Starting to come together well. And again, this can just be the bottom layer. You know, you can do the bottom layer and then work your way up to deepen it and then put in more details. So, one thing about watercolor is patience is required. Just because some things, you know, you can't paint until the pieces that it's touching are dry. Now, even if this, because this is the same color scheme right here, even if this dorsal fin does bleed into this long back fin, I'm not too concerned because it's all basically the same colors. And since this is just the base layer, we can, so I'm going to just put a little detail in here, let this dry. We can go back later and put the detail and fix any issues that way. Okay. Okay. Now, the lower part of the face is quite just yellow, so I'm going to keep that yellow. I'm going to keep the little mouth part. You know, we can fix that in later. But for now, let's work on the face going up into that. The Alizarin Crimson and Cadmium Red. We'll make a little bit more of that. Since the face is the boldest part of this fish. Okay, so we're going to start with the yellow. I've already pre-mixed the yellow here, just with some water. And we'll, in the very bottom you can see is more of a whitish color, so we won't really leave it white because it's not really white on the fish, but we'll just come in with the yellow cheeks. Here. Okay, and it is going to blend, so we'll start with the same color that we've been using and we'll fill in the face. I'm going to connect the two last. Okay, the yellow and this orangey color, I'm going to mix those last because they definitely will bleed together, which is okay, and I ultimately want it to do that, but because the yellow is a much stronger color, there we go, we'll get around those eyes, and we definitely want to keep the part of those eyes white that are supposed to be white. Okay, so we'll mix those together a bit there, and now we'll come in with this is just the Cadmium Red with some water. And we're going to build up around, maybe this one is flow. I feel like these colors are a little lighter. And we can always make them darker, but we'll fill in with, we'll name this one Flow, and the other one will be Fin. Her body will be Fin. And then they'll have pals. So on the fish, the original fish, this part of the eye, and don't worry about, the distinct edges of the head, that will fill in later. Okay, just gonna clean up a little of this. I just rinsed my brush and dabbed it on my paper. Okay. Whoop. And let's go back and finish this bottom fin here. We have a little of this. Let's make a little bit more of this Cadmium Red and Cadmium Yellow mixture. The one thing I had to work on just with myself was remembering, unless you're getting into realism, which is fine if that's your choice. Painting art is all interpretation, so there aren't mistakes. It's all just in the eye of the beholder, which is you, the artist. Okay. Let's leave it at that for now. I may take a tiny bit, a very light little bit of the Cadmium Yellow, Cadmium Red mixture, and just draw a baseline underneath the chin of this fish. Kind of bring that into play there, so that's there. Okay. Because we'll definitely want to make its mouth distinct. Okay, I'm also going to rinse my brush in clear water, tap it dry, and just blur out some of this center that isn't as dark. Okay, and when we come back with the darker next layer, we can make it more distinct. Okay, so let's see, we want to feel with the back of our fingers, because you never know if you have oil or grease or anything on your fingers. If it feels cool to the touch, that typically means it's still wet, so you don't want to paint this next layer on anything that's wet. So we're going to start at this second fin, and we're going to come back to the Cadmium Red, oh, you know what, I'm going to go with this mixture I made up top here, which was the Cadmium Red, Cadmium Yellow, and Alizarin Crimson. Let's make a little bit more of that. Add a little of that yellow in there. Okay. So, I want to outline the fin again, and now see this is wet on dry, so it's going to be more sharp and distinct. But again, it's up to me to leave it that way or not, which I don't want to leave it that way just because, you know, a fish doesn't have a strong line like that. So we're going to make that fold over part of the fin there. I'm just going to draw that in. And then we're going to come with our just plain water and kind of blend that in. So it looks like the back, we'll add a little more water. So it looks like that fin has folded over as he's just kind of hanging out there looking at us. And again, remember that, you know, fish have a lot of sheer areas. So, you know, it's not going to be, I mean, unless, again, you're going into the realism and painting scales and all that, which actually I follow somebody who does amazing realistic aquatic life paintings. Okay, let's see, I'm going to come back again to that Cadmium Red, and I'm just going to make some of these look like fish fins here. I'm just, with my thin little brush, I'm just going to paint those in. I'm going to dab my brush and kind of go over them, thin them out a little bit. Kind of pull them in. I'm going to make sure I don't touch that fold over part of the fin because that's wet still, so that will bleed. Okay, so again, I'm just kind of following the guidelines of the original fin so that we can make flow work here. Okay. And I watered down that deep color. My dog is sleeping over here next to me. I'm sure you can hear her snoring. Okay. And the more water you use, the more blendability you'll have, which is a good thing in, you know, the specific areas that you want there to be the blendability. And you can make this as detailed or not as you want. Okay, I'm going to add just a little bit more color to this fold over fin here. Give it a little bit more dimension in there. Make it a little bit darker. Okay, and then let's come to, I'm going to do just a little work here to the fins. So we'll come to the same crimson, cadmium red, and yellows. We'll start at the base of the fin here and work our way. You know, you can try little striations like this to make it look more like a fin, and just, you know, let that dry and see how see how you like it. And if you love it, great. If you don't, you know, just go back with your color and kind of fill in over it. And then you kind of get to start over. So I think this fin is more facing back, so we'll keep the ridges there, but I'm not going to do all the same striations as I did on this one. Okay, I'm liking how that's looking. Still has his eyeballs there, which we'll get to. And let's see, we'll come to that top dorsal fin. Okay, I'm just gonna go along the outline of the fin here. And as you can see in the original, and as it looked like on the live fish, it did look like it was, you know, two-parted, so that there was a couple layers, you know, with it being as sheer as it is. So I'm just going to kind of play on that and fill that in there. Okay, good. So we'll come back to the face here. So let's see, we'll keep the mouth. I'm going to come back and get some more of this cadmium yellow. And I'm just going to add a touch of, let's see, I think I might actually add a touch of burnt sienna. So I know I told you there were the 3 colors, but I'm going to get a little bit of burnt sienna and add that in just to make it a little bit of a brownish yellow for the bottom of that face. There, that's better. You see, it's not as bright as the cadmium yellow all by itself. Okay, so let's try that. We'll come in, dab my brush with the base of the cheeks here. I'm putting somebody to sleep. Hopefully you all are happily painting. Okay, let's come in with that same 3-color mixture. And you know what I'm going to do this time actually? I think I'm going to do the wet on wet, so I'm just going to wet my brush with clean paint. And I'm going to just, clean water. You don't want too much water, but you just want to wet the surface of the face here that you're going to paint. And because you're going over the existing, the existing color still is there, but you'll see how it will really bleed the colors nicely. Okay, so let's get that tricolor blend. And we'll start at the ridge, go around the cap of the head here, and kind of fill in. We'll fill in this bolder, darker part, and a little bit of that crimson, just the crimson by itself with water. See, that's doing much more how I wanted it to do. Okay, I'm going to keep my brush on the page so I don't have too many dauby marks. Okay, then I'm going to come in with my clean brush again and just kind of pull this in so it's not as bare, but that the bold still stays. Perfect. Okay, and we'll come back with that burnt sienna yellow mixture, just a tad, with some water. And we'll go over the chin a bit here. And we'll add a little bit of the cadmium red, cadmium clean brush and just blend that sharp line there. Okay, great. All right, let's get a little bit more of that burnt sienna with that yellow. We'll get a little more burnt sienna than we had before. There we go. Make it a little darker. And we're just gonna trace. And it's okay right now if it bleeds a little bit. I'm gonna come back and do a little bit more strategic work. Okay, I think I'm actually gonna leave the fins and the body the way it is. And then I'm gonna come back. If you want to use a hair dryer, if you want to use if you have an art dryer, you know, that will help speed up the work. Or if you want to do a water break or something like that while it dries. I'm just going to outline these eyes here with that alizarin crimson. I'm going to come up on the head, make this a little more bold up here. Kind of fill that in a little bit more. And we'll see how that looks when it dries.